How what?
How do you feel about talking?
Good. So I've got a couple of different ones I want to talk about. One's kind of a serious one that is one of my favorites. The other one is absolutely bananas and deserves to be known by more people. Which one do we want to hear about first? Leaving it up to y'all.
I say go with bananas first. Get out of the way.
Bananas.
Bananas.
All right. Bananas
Get
it
the
is.
bananas
So
out of the way.
I'm here to talk about the most insane anime of all time. I do not say this lightly. I have seen some really, really crazy ones. But this
Mhm.
one is an anime called Excel Saga. This was on TV in Japan from 1999 to 2000. It is extraordinarily loosely based on the manga by the same title by Koshi Rikto. And this came to the USA in the early 2000s because, of course, we lag behind a little bit. It takes time for dubs to happen and then finally for it to get on TV. So when I say this is the most insane anime of all time, let me give you a sampling of some of the reasons that I call this the most insane anime of all time. First of all, they kill off in the show the creator of the manga in the first episode. So we have a very literal death of the author. He is in fact a character in the anime.
Did he do
Recurring
that in the
character in
manga?
the
Did he kill himself in the manga, or did they just kill him in the anime?
They just killed him in the anime. The anime has absolutely nothing to do with the manga other than basically the same characters and general premise. The plot goes completely out the window. They just kind of do their own thing with it, and it is hysterical. So, very literal death of the author. He is a recurring character in the show. Death is kind of meaningless on this thing. Um, at the beginning of the first several episodes, he, says like, I am Koshi Rito and I'm here to give my approval for the adaptation of Excel Saga into a insert genre here.
Did he voice
Uh,
his own character?
I actually don't know that off the top of my head. I really
Okay.
probably should have looked that up,
I was
but
like, he must be a really good sport.
I do know that he absolutely loves the adaptation though. Like it absolutely played very fast and loose with the plots, but he really was a fan of the anime adaptation. It's delightful. Definitely a good sport. Just a funny, ridiculous kind of guy for creating this thing, and then the anime is just a whole nother level of ridiculous. Um, so in addition to him being killed off in the first episode, the titular character, Excel, is killed off about 6 times in the first episode. I counted. A couple of them are questionable because it's like, did she actually die? Was that an actual death? Or was that she really should have died but didn't? Because there's one where like she and another guy plummet to the ground from on top of a construction site and just kind of pop out of the hole in the ground like, hey, we're all right. So it's like, did she die and come back to life again? Was that actually a death or no? I'm not entirely certain. So it's kind of hard to say how many times she dies in the first episode. She also dies throughout the series numerous other
Now,
times. She
her
gets
name
shot
is
with a bazooka
Excel.
by her boss, things like that.
Is that right? What's her name?
Her name is Excel.
Is Excel.
First name Excel, last name Excel, Excel for short. It's this whole running gag. Um, it's also her code name because she works for this organization called Across, where her boss wants to take over the world, but he's the very reasonable kind of person with, actually attainable goals. He's not going to start with the whole world. He's going to start with just this one city. So they're trying to take over the city, and that is the story right there. His name is Il Palazzo. Very fashy sounding name, delightful, love it. Her eyes may or may not actually have spinning swastikas in them at one point when she's
Hmm.
talking about how much she loves this guy.
Bashy.
It is batshit, like absolutely batshit. And
I
I
haven't
forgot
haven't
about
heard
that
that
detail.
thing in
I was
that word in a
rewatching
while.
it over the last couple days, and I was just like, oh my God. It's been like 10 or 15 years since I last watched this. I'm just like, oh my God. So it's a parody anime. It parodies lots of different genres. Like I said, the manga creator gives permission for them to adapt it at the beginning of the first several episodes. There's like a like war thing where it's like guerrilla fighters like doing a revolution, and there's like a romantic comedy one where literally the kind of framing device for the episode is Il Palazzo is playing a dating sim, and that is what controls the story. It is bizarre.
Oh, man.
um it parodies a lot of different animes. Like there's references to Dragon Ball Z in there, Sailor Moon, Power Rangers, just all of these like 80s and 90s animated series in there. It is ridiculous. There's another character named Hyatt who is an alien chick who shows up, I think in the third or so episode, who then is enlisted to like go find Excel because she's disappeared. During the third episode, she ends up going to this like guerrilla revolution situation and she's just gone for a while and her boss is like, where the hell did she go? I don't even know. And Hyatt is like chronically ill, constantly dying as well, not because of being an idiot and getting shot or falling or doing other stupid things like Excel. It's she just constantly just bleeds to death or passes out and just dies. It's never explained. It's just the thing she's dealing with. That's just her life.
Right.
Which, you know, I kind of relate to as a chronically disabled person. I don't die all the time, but I get it. Sometimes
I feel like it a lot. Yeah.
So that's the thing that's going on. There's also this dog character that Excel adopts, basically for the purpose of being an emergency food supply. Her name is Menchie. She's adorable. And there's this Excel isn't paid well enough by her main job, so she's constantly having to find these weird side jobs in order to, you know, get food and things and afford her apartment or whatever. So every episode of this series concludes with the dog Menchie singing about how she is trapped by this crazy woman and is going to be eaten, and she's literally just howling, and there's this like woman who appears next to her with like a translation and like is speaking in Japanese, translating what the dog is singing by howling.
Man, this is right up my alleyway.
It really is. You have got to watch this one. I'm not even kidding. So yeah, the whole show is like that. Now here's where it gets really crazy. I have only just begun to tell you how crazy this is. So halfway through the series, after the 13th episode out of 26, only 25 of which were allowed to actually air during the original run in Japan. I will get there. Okay. The voice actress for the English dub just kind of blew her vocal cords because Excel talks about 5 to 6 times faster than I talk when I'm excited. She has the most ADHD character on any show ever, and also very high-pitched, just ridiculous vocal performance. And so the original voice actress for the English dub, Jessica Calvello, like destroyed her voice doing this and had to just stop doing it. She had permanent vocal damage from voicing this ridiculous character. So then halfway through, they brought in a new VA, Larissa Walcott, who finished the second half of the show. This is alluded to in the actual show, by the way. Excel has apparently just been missing for a while and everything else is carrying on. Il Palazzo and Hyatt are like talking about this. It's just like, is she coming back? Like, what's going on? And then you just kind of hear her in the distance, like approaching, doing her high-pitched, ridiculous, super, super fast talking. And she shows up and it's like, yeah, fine.
Do they go a whole episode without her or just part of one?
Not a whole episode. It's just the beginning of episode 14 is like this. Okay. And like it sounds like some time has passed and then she's coming back. As if nothing happened. Right. She has a different voice now, but she talks about the same and it's fine. So this is all going on, and then the second half of the show starts to get a little bit more serious tonally, which also makes it all the more ridiculous because you've had this absolutely insane just episode to episode. All right, what kind of thing are we parodying this week, kids? And then, you know, it starts to actually have the like, oh, let's actually take over the city plot starts to go on. Things heat up. There's like these civil servants trying to resist them. They dress up like Power Rangers. It is incredible. There are all kinds of dysfunctional. One of the characters is actually literally the director of the anime, who has an afro for some reason and is just in this like as one of these crazy like people trying to like resist this take over the city effort.
What's the name of the villain again? What's the name of this villain again?
Il Palazzo.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, fashy guy. Incidentally, though, the interesting thing about him as a character is he, all good villains don't believe they're evil, right? He sounds ridiculously fashy. He wants to take over the city and then the world, but also it's because he sees everything as super, super corrupt. And some of his rants actually kind of have a point. If you're listening, you're just like, I mean, he's not wrong. We really do kind of suck, actually, like, as a society. There's a lot going on there in terms of like discussing social issues in Japan. Like, one is there's a recurring character named Pedro who is a migrant worker from Colombia, and he's a construction worker. He's the guy that falls off of the construction site with Excel, and he actually does die. She comes back, she's fine. He gets killed and is a ghost, and he goes back home to Colombia to go see his sexy wife and his son. Yes, he calls her his sexy wife over and over again. She has moved on. She's with this different guy. She's like, my husband is dead, and he's dead to me anyway because I love this guy now. And all of this craziness with like infidelity and stuff. And but they're really making a point with like it's over the top. It's an absolute farce. It is absurdist humor at its most absurd, but they're also making a very good point about foreign labor, being this guy like leaves everything behind to make this like absolutely atrocious wage doing this insanely dangerous job, only to get killed. And he just wants to support his wife and son. That's all he cares about, and see how well that goes for him. So there's actually a lot of very serious critique of Japanese society in this anime at the same time, even though it is so ridiculously over the top. Now, the best thing about all of this is the series finale, episode 26, which, as I mentioned, did not air during the original run. And that is because the creators of this anime decided to go absolutely bananas, deliberately breaking all of the rules so that the episode would not get past the censors, which is also written into the script. It constantly breaks the fourth wall, constantly. Justin, I think you're talking, but you're muted.
Well, yeah, or something.
I guess we're good.
We're good.
All right, cool. So episode 26 did not air during the original run because they were deliberately making it so that there's no way in hell it would get past the censors. So they introduced this one and they're just like, all right, we're going to do a musical episode. And the manga creator is like, you absolutely cannot make this into a musical episode. What are you doing? They kill him, of course. And then they proceed to have
he says it on camera. Okay.
I mean, it's an animated version of him.
Okay.
He's animated.
Okay.
And everybody starts singing. It is ridiculous. Il Palazzo is like this like opera dude, like, speaking in recitatives and stuff, and very suitable for this Italian named dude. It gets even more violent. The deaths are even more over the top, if that was even possible. Yes, it is. We're talking severed limbs. We're talking just people just taking their heads off randomly. Hyatt, who was constantly like coughing up blood and stuff, has profuse amounts of blood coming out of her body in hilarious ways with like just, there's like a hole in the top of her head just starts spraying out as if we're in the...
This is definitely Japanese.
Very. Yes, very. Shit you can't get away with in the United States. You can't get away with this in Japan either, but actually the violence is not even the reason that this did not make it past the censors. We're getting there. Okay. But the violence escalates over the course of this final episode, to where eventually Hyatt drowns or dies in this pool of her own blood, which there is so much blood that it just shows her dead on the street, and like the entire ground just becomes absolutely 100% saturated with blood. It's just coming and coming and coming, and the Excel's like, oh, she's usually fine, but she's been stopped up for a really long time. She's really holding back on us, actually. Just to describe this amount of blood that is going on here. The plot of this episode is like the tropiest, most ridiculous thing ever, but of course they had to go there at some point during the show, and it's amazing that they didn't do it in the previous 25 episodes. They have a body swap episode. So before we get to this point at the end of the episode where all of this blood is happening, they, Excel and Hyatt have switched bodies. So you have Excel just being like, why is my body so fragile all of a sudden? Why can't I do literally anything? She like injures herself or kills herself, literally just talking the way that she talks, which is super, super fast and super, super high pitched, and like wrecked Jessica Calvello's vocal cords. And meanwhile, Hyatt is absolutely hyped to have a body that can actually do things for the first time in a really, really long time. So she's just like, I can jump, I can skip, and all of this stuff. And she's just so happy. So the body swap situation's going on. Another character who came up earlier in the show is this 8-year-old girl named Cosette, who is very unfortunately named for those who are familiar with Les Miserables. So of course, she's orphaned, her mom's dead, everything's bad for her. She gets kind of taken in during a previous episode. It seems like she's going to be a one-off character, and then she just suddenly comes back at the end. And of course, as an 8-year-old who's seen all of the stuff that happens on this show, she is utterly traumatized. She got really, really dark and really, really psychotic and evil in an absolutely glorious way. She is so creepy. And it's actually her fault that the body swap even happened. She just decided to just fuck with them. And one of the civil servant characters who's like, helping with the resistance to across the organization is a pedophile, which is also a very common trope in anime for some reason, and they get away with this a lot more than anybody could in any cartoon in the United States, even those for adults.
Sure.
There are pedophilia jokes left and right in a lot of these animes. This one decided to take it to the nth fucking degree in this final episode. This is the reason that it did not make it past the censors. This character, who is supposedly 8 years old, goes off with this guy to a sex hotel, which is a thing in Japan, by the way, which is actually pretty cool. Not for 8-year-olds, though.
Right.
No. And of course, when she's about to finally get into bed with him, she reveals she's actually very endowed in the chest region, and says something about actually being a consenting adult. And of course, the pedophile character is like, well, not interested anymore, and he just leaves.
Wow.
So that joke right there is the reason that they could not air this.
It's definitely making fun of perverts.
It is, and it is ridiculous and so over the top. So as I mentioned earlier, the episodes typically conclude with the dog singing about being trapped by the psychotic girl and doomed to be eaten or whatever. So this time, for the final episode, where they've just been like, you know what, we're just going to do everything else completely ridiculous and over the top. Why not do it with the end credits too? So rather than the dog, the translator crawls on all fours, nude, with a collar and a chain, like something out of a BDSM scene, crawls over to the microphone and music stand where the dog has been and starts singing in Japanese about the same thing. And then the dog is the translator and starts howling to translate the Japanese into dog. I completely forgot about that twist on the end credits. And when I rewatched this earlier today, I was just howling with laughter.
She's still traumatized, you can tell, right?
So yeah, this show is now 25 years old. It has not aged well, which means it has actually aged gloriously, because that's the point. It is supposed to be so over the top that you're watching it laughing and horrified and what even is this? And it's postmodernist as hell, it's surreal, it's absurd, it's an absolute trip from start to finish, and it is definitely not for everybody. I don't even know how teenage me watched this for the first time and got through it, because God, I was a prude back then.
You're just like me and Chuck. Look how you turned out.
You guys both need to watch this. It is.
I'm sure.
This sounds like one of the greatest shows I've ever heard of.
Sounds like Dusan. It sounds like Dusan Makaveyev after the Sweet movie went to Japan and made an anime. All right.
It is ridiculous, but yeah, guys, that is the glory that is Excel Saga. The entire thing, including episode 26, is available to watch on Crunchyroll if you have access to that one. Have at it. It is a blast, and I wish that more people knew about this thing, because it's one of those infamous animes that people who are really into anime generally know about, but the mainstream, just general
I'd only
United
ever heard the
States
name. I didn't know
and
anything about what it
Australia
was about.
and New Zealand and anywhere else, viewers do not know about this thing.
You got to send Justin a link then,
would be
for
horrified.
Sure.
Yes, just it is a piece of work of a show, and
Very
I was trying to figure out a good anime to talk about, and it just came to me all of a sudden. I was just like, oh my god, I should talk about Excel Saga, and there you go.
Definitely
it is the
cult
cultiest,
TV.
most ridiculous TV
that
show.
Shit crazy.
Yes,
absolutely that shit.
It's kind of the polar opposite of Kimba. So we got
it
range.
really
we
is
got range,
yes.
people. So, any final thoughts, or do you want to turn over to
versatility?
Our next,
I don't know if I can really
our
top
next
just
contestant.
describing the final episode of this thing. So go move on.
We're getting mad
That's
now.
enough Excel.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, what does CF Roberts have to allow?
Okay. Well, before I pipe in and tell our viewers at home what they've won, remember to like, subscribe, ring that bell for notifications.
Thank you.
Get all that good stuff going.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Hey, buy my book while you're at it too.
Buy Bill's
buy his book.
That's a perfect trifecta. Yeah. Let's get them all up there. Look at that. It's summertime.
Go read my master's
magazine.
thesis.
So
yeah. Well, go read her.
We shamelessly promote
read a
ourselves.
master's thesis. Shameless.
It's kind of like writing a novella, because it's about novella length,
Hey, me and Justin are working on a revisionist pulp adventure saga.
Ooh, cool. Oh yeah, we'll have to do that. Yeah,
we're doing it on the down low.
That's gone by the wayside.
That sounds really cool.
But I incorporated into mine that I'm actually writing that website, so it actually is. I thought Justin was going to be upset, but he was pleased as punch.
Yeah,
we've seen.
No, that's cool. Yeah, tell me about it at some point.
I will. It's hilarious. Great sessions.
You should allow Bill to plug his book for a while.
We'll have time next episode to plug his book.
Sure.
I gotta plug it in increments. We don't want to overdose.
Right.
No overhyping. So Chuck, what you got, man?
Okay. Well, in order to talk about the shows that the two shows that I'm going to cover, I need to basically preamble it with how I discovered this show and my experiences with it.
Okay.
And a lot of it was in the early 80s when I first happened upon the show. I was kind of almost by choice, because I didn't start out this way, but in a lot of ways I was kind of very tunnel visioned or very narrow minded about music. And
I remember being that way.
At this point in time, I was just a militant metalhead. I would not listen to anything else. Disliked a lot of everything else.
I love metal, but why? How come when you become a metalhead, your brain closes for a while? I mean, it's happened to me. Everybody I've known who went through a metalhead phase. I still listen to metal almost daily, but I'm not a metalhead, because metalheads will be like, I don't want to hear Joy Division. That's weird.
Yeah. No, a lot of it was. There were a couple of bands. Back then I did actually like the Ramones. I did actually like Joy Division. Among other bands, but there were a few, but generally speaking, I was very kind of deliberately tunnel visioned as far as what I listened to. And I think a lot of that comes down to, I don't know, I guess maybe if you were a certain kid growing up at a certain point in time, you felt kind of marginalized and ridiculed for your musical taste.
Yeah.
And that was always the case with me. And that was probably how I developed the bad attitude I did. But at some point in time, you grow, you expand, and,
one can hope, yes.
You expand in multiple ways,
Right.
But we'll try not to go into that. However, at the time I was just out of high school, and I had begun this late shift working as a dishwasher, which would sometimes run very late. I'd come home sometimes at 1 or 2 or 3 in the morning, and my and I would come home late. There'd be mostly just nothing much to watch on the cable, but I would flip it over. And one thing on Saturday nights that I would frequently find and enjoy would be Night Flight.
Mm.
And Night Flight was occasionally showing this show called New Wave Theater.
Mm.
And so I kind of became exposed to New Wave Theater watching it, and it was a show I kind of stuck on to. It was very much kind of like a showcase of the LA punk scene. Featured a lot of independent bands, kind of a lot of the bigger bands on that scene, and some of the maybe never went anywhere bands, but a lot of the bands that were in there were just like 45 Grave was in there, Angry Samoans.
Can I ask you a quick question? Was this before or after the release of the Penelope Spheris movie, Decline of Western Civilization? Because that's the same territory.
Man, I can't really say. I can tell you
it was 82, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, this started in 81 and it wrapped kind of against its will in 83. But I'm not sure exactly what the origins were of it. I think it was kind of more a local cable show. I think may have started on public access. Not sure, but it definitely had kind of the low budget kind of vibes. But it was one weird show and had all these bands that generally I didn't care for. There was a fair amount of hardcore, and I was not a hardcore fan at the time. But I was kind of riveted by it because it was so weird, and it would just have these weird little subliminals thrown in where you'd see something like you'd see weird kind of images with solarization on them, or other odd video effects from back at that time. You'd see atomic bombs going off. You'd see just thrown in while the bands are playing. You'd see just footage of people dressed as clowns chasing a chicken around at Mardi Gras. You'd see these jarring images of just emaciated bodies being thrown into a mass grave. So yeah, these were almost thrown at you like subliminals almost.
A lot of those images pervaded the punk, the kind of punk DIY video scene back then.
Yeah, but and it was hosted by some oddball cat named Peter Ivers, who I had no real knowledge of at the time. He I later found out that he was the guy who sang wrote and sang the Lady in the Radiator song on Eraserhead.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
Huh. Yeah. Wow. But he'd occasionally get up and jam with harmonica with the band, but he would go into these long host rants where he'd say almost kind of spiritual things about new wave and what the new wave would bring and everything else. There were little comedy sketches kind of thrown in, and they were just, I mean, to say they cut is kind of minimizing the point. I was just very kind of taking the piss on kind of Leave It to Beaver suburban culture, kind of taking the piss on just Reagan and kind of the Cold War and everything else. And really, I mean, I'm not talking.
Did the Dead Kennedys ever appear on this?
I think they did. Yeah, I know
alley.
they did, in fact. Yeah. But just savage satire. I mean, this was not SNL level satire. It went way deeper and way harder, which I was kind of all about.
Yeah.
But as I watched this show, I was occasionally, I didn't like most of the music they were playing at that time, but I was kind of fascinated by all that. But the more I watched it, the more I realized, I forget what year it was when I was catching up with all this, but eventually I caught on to the fact that this host, Peter Ivers, who ran the show, had been murdered. And the show went out of production when he was killed.
Oh my God.
But I'm looking at, and they're splicing in images of newspaper clippings of his death. And I'm like, what the fuck?
Oh.
And yeah, sure enough. And then somewhere toward, they have this kind of puppet creature. It was like a skeleton with a shroud, just kind of mouthing this tribute to Peter Ivers and talking about giving him a moment of silence, whereupon the skeleton puppet just shuts up and you get the sound of crickets chirping. And that goes on for about a minute, and they say good night, and that's it. And it's kind of like, so I don't know at what point I was watching this show after the fact, probably most of the time, but it took me a while to realize it. And so that was kind of an interesting diversion for a couple of years. And round about the late 80s, when I was more receptive to the music that was on those shows, I found it on VHS. I found it for rent. And so I picked it right up and said, okay, I want to see what this is all. I like a lot of these bands. And so took it home and watched it and kind of became more and more receptive to it. But just kind of a show that didn't last long, kind of picked up a cult following, and was kind of intrinsically, just unfortunately, wrapped up in the death of its host. But just kind of a crazy curio of the early LA punk scene.
It sounds like a rabbit hole I'd like to go down sometime soon.
Same.
Yeah, it's many episodes of it are available on YouTube, and so
I've seen one. I saw
check
part
them
of
out.
one episode years ago, and it was on Night Flight, but we didn't have cable, and so I could barely make it out. It was like fuzzy and staticky, and that's how I even knew it existed. And then when you mentioned it a few weeks ago, I was like, oh yeah, that's that crazy show. Why didn't I look for it? I did
there is
see it at the video store, but I never rented it.
Yeah, there is actually a Night Flight app on Roku.
Yeah, I know they're back, but kind of back.
And so you can see a lot of it there.
Oh, I should get my Roku out of my balls, because that's a free channel. I mean, the Roku channel's free if you have a Roku. Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
So that's great. Any parting thoughts on this kind of strange milestone?
Well, in a lot of ways, it just kind of broke open my brain and exposed me to a lot of new things. And
it's always good.
The whole mystery the thing is wrapped around with the mysterious death, mysterious unsolved murder of this host.
2 degrees of David Lynch too. Jeez. That makes sense. Well, thanks, man. That's pretty awesome. Hi, this is Henry Covert, and this has been Deep Images. Hope you enjoyed today's segment, and we will be back soon to continue our discussion on Cult TV. Feel free to drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. Stay tuned for the ending credits and the beautiful music of Ghost of Day, and thank you for watching.